Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. Yesterday we spoke about Bretonnia and what I believe they deserve in terms of mechanics when an eventual siege rework comes in. I did mention that this was to become a series on the channel where we'd be looking at all of the different races individually. So today we're going to look towards the vampire counts. One of the races which I believe have not been represented the best in terms of lore and playstyle. Keep in mind that most of my reference here comes directly from either the tabletop or lore for Warhammer Fantasy Battles, so without further ado, let's begin. The Vampire Counts are one of the most unique factions in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. They are a horde of flesh and bone, ruled by near-deathless, magical and very powerful entities. But what really sets them apart from all the other races in the Warhammer world is that this race has no access to any artillery or basic missile weaponry such as archers. In normal battles, this is generally not too much of an issue, as your units basically serve as a meat shield, while your spellcasters and blender lords get the majority of the work done. However, when it comes to sieges, things can get a little slower. Both offensively and defensively, the lack of range or even artillery can quite slow down your gameplay. And in truth, they should have no access to any of these things, because, well, in a lore-friendly sense, they don't actually need it. So let's take the time now to look at what they could have to make sieges a tad more bearable. First, let's look towards the defensive side of things, as there really isn't too much. Firstly, and I know this might not be a popular opinion, but no attrition. Vampire Count armies should take no form of siege attrition, and the reason because of that is because, well, they're dead, so they wouldn't really be taking any forms of attrition, would they? Attrition damage when in regards to sieges is representation of starving out your enemy, but you can't starve out the undead, can you? They generally don't need food to survive. Yeah, sure, the vampires would need blood, but maybe just have the vampires suffer a form of attrition, but even then it would have to be much lower. Like I said, this is likely not to be a popular opinion, but it makes sense thematically. Next would be the implementation of magical towers, known as wizard towers on the tabletop. We discussed this for Bretonnia, but in case you haven't seen that video, I will discuss it in brief here too. Wizard towers are basically just upgraded towers which will be able to have access to a chosen lore of magic. On the tabletop, these magical towers would have access to all the spells of a chosen lore of magic, but I would say that it would probably be best to have them as bound spells with 1 or 2 uses, and just only a few spells at that. This should work as an upgradable building with multiple choices, and your choices would be the lores of magic for the vampire counts themselves, the lore of vampires, the lore of death, or the lore of shadows. But say you don't want magic from your towers for one reason or another, a second option could also be introduced, known as the Tower of Blood. How this worked on the tabletop is it would provide your units that occupied the tower a wide variety of bonuses such as Hatred and Frenzy. Hatred, of course, is not in the game, but Frenzy is, and it could even serve to benefit to increase melee output damage. Though instead of just providing benefits for a unit or two within the area of influence of the tower, it could have maybe even map-wide benefits. So long as you still control the tower, of course, which would give you more reason to stay atop of the battlements and fight your enemy head on. Now honestly, that I believe was everything in regards to any possible implementations for the vampire counts defensively. I know it's not a lot of changes, however, they need more changes offensively than defensively, as offensively, if they're facing against forces which have a lot of range, they will take a decent amount of damage before they even get to the wall. Remember that with these videos, I'm often speaking not just in the retrospect of the player base, but also AI. Now let's start with the possible offensive changes for sieges, and we're going to start off with one that's not going to be too popular either. Remove ladders for skeletons and zombies. It honestly makes no sense to me lore-wise whatsoever. Keep in mind that the undead for the vampire counts are not supposed to be highly intelligent. They're not like the Tomb Kings, but rather just very much unliving shells being controlled by dark magics. It makes no sense to have zombies or skeletons climbing up ladders. By all means, they should be able to use siege towers because, well, yes, they need to have something, but ladders just really take away from the immersion of things. Don't worry, there are some ideas to supplement the loss of this, which we'll start moving on to now. Firstly, we've got ethereal units such as Hex Raves, and I'm assuming Spirit Hosts will eventually also be included in the form of a DLC. They should be able to travel through walls. So on the tabletop and in lore, ethereal units are, well, as you can expect, ghosts. And ghosts, as you can imagine, are able to phase through walls. In fact, a big reason to deploy them in the tabletop back in the days of 8th edition was because Hex Raves and Spirit Hosts and so on were ethereal. Hex Raves were known to be very highly mobile units on the tabletop, and with the fact that they could literally traverse through walls, it made it easier for you to flank around your enemy. Let me just give you an example as to how this could work in Total War. So you're laying siege to an enemy fortification, and they have a decent amount of troops waiting for you on the other side of the gate. Now, you are very much aware that as soon as that gate goes down, you'll be met with the usual mosh pit as your troops try to rush in and your enemy meets you at the gate itself. It could be with this scenario that your siege towers were destroyed, or you are also low in magic as you might have gotten greedy on the gamble before the battle even started. It might just be me doing that though. It would be beneficial here to be able to use Hex Wraiths as they were intended to be used in lore and on the tabletop. You could send them to travel through the wall and then flank around your enemy. That way you can force some leadership debuffs on the enemy that's met you in that mosh pit. While this might sound a bit overpowered, bear in mind that once again, the vampire counts don't have access to missiles or artillery. Sure, you would have magic, but bear in mind that your enemy also has magic, but with artillery and missiles too. So something like this I believe would be able to balance the scales a little bit. It actually was effective balancing in the siege supplement known as the Blood in the Badlands for Warhammer 8th edition. And finally, something from said supplement which could be kinda cool for the vampire counts and the vampire counts alone. This was known as Restless Dead, which goes as follows. The attacker binds the departed souls of those that have starved within the castle walls and unleashes them upon the survivors as a ghastly spectral host. With this, the attacker could then create new spectral host units, and this unit may be placed anywhere on the tabletop, even inside the castle. Now, of course, we don't have any spirit host units just yet. I believe that we'll probably get them in the future because they were pretty popular back in the day. But the mechanic could still be introduced, just reimagined ever so slightly. With the loss of ladders, of course, something else would need to be brought in to supplement that. So how about instead of just something very generic, but something truly unique and in the form of a new siege equipment, which you will have to take a turn or two to actually build up. What this would do is, say for example per turn, try to spawn in a unit of zombies or even basic skeletons. It very much depends. But the spawning itself would be directly behind the enemy lines within the castle. But these wouldn't be treated as summoned units, but instead generic units that would form part of your army. Meaning that of course these units would not start to degrade over time. Now this would be kinda interesting because you would be able to spawn them, say for example in a corner of the castle. They'd kinda arrive into the enemy territory just like if their own reinforcements were coming in. This could be kinda cool because that way it would have to make the AI player or a player that you're playing against think about changing their tactics and possibly having a unit or two waiting over there, which would of course mean less enemies to protect the gates or just the walls in general. To further make this a bit more potent, they could even have a research on your research tree which could upgrade these to Graveguard. I think that would be fair enough, especially in late game campaigns where you would already be dealing with much stronger garrisons and much stronger armies. And of course, this would give the vampire counts a very unique mechanic that nobody else would have, but fits really well with their lore. In fact, a few things that we've spoken about would not be accessible to other races, and I believe that stuff like that would make Siege Warfare a lot more fun in a potential Siege Warfare rework. Bear in mind that in a lore and tabletop aspect, all these races are supposed to be so incredibly different from each other, but right now it seems that in Total War Warhammer, they all generally have the same playstyle, barring just a few minor things. But what do you guys think about these possible ideas focusing around vampire count changes in a Siege rework? I think that these things would not be so easily doable by modders too, so it would have to come from something official. But honestly, I just want Sieges to be better, and I think mechanics like this could make it much better for the vampire counts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fame level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.